So the day I made the report, all I could think about was his next partners and his sister and his mom who he'd hurt while we were in a relationship, and how I could prevent that and show others that there's a better way to go about these things. That's definitely what's kept me alive. If it weren't for my heart for others, I would not be here today.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 462 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Today's episode, I have an interview with Daryn Brito, author of The Becoming Unrepeatable Miracle, Who Are You? What makes Daryn's journey so remarkable is how she turns her lived experiences into transformative wisdom. Daryn challenges us to question who we are beneath all the labels, and she invites us to step into our most authentic, fullest selves. She shares the genesis of this book she's released, her current postgraduate work and studies, and her goal towards creating more effective programs, procedures, and services for those in dire need of a combination of efficiency and empathy. It's a fascinating and powerful interview, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor.
Are you an independent author navigating the complexities of the publishing business? Do you dream of transforming your passion for writing into a thriving author business? Don't miss this opportunity to immerse yourself in the world of Canadian indie publishing's first author business conference. This year, the third year of the Toronto Indie Author Conference will be taking place April 18th and 19th in the Appel Salon at the Toronto Reference Library. This year's speakers will include Mallory Cooper, J.F. Garrard, Eve Silver, Zoe York, Andy Peliquin, Tikiri Herath, Michael Chatfield, Charlotte Morganti, Tao Wong, and more. This weekend event, held in downtown Toronto, Ontario in the spring, is the only conference in Canada that focuses on the indie author mindset and spirit. Stark Publishing and Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing is proud to be a sponsor, and Mark Leslie Lefebvre will be returning as a guest speaker for this third year of the conference. Don't miss out on your opportunity to learn about the craft and business of writing from the unique Canadian perspective. And you can check it out at torontoindieauthor.com.
That's right, I'm going to be at Toronto Indie Author Con again, and I'm so thrilled that there's a conference related specifically to independent publishing and indie authors, rather than the 99.9% of conferences in Canada that are all about traditional publishing. I think authors need to fully understand that they're the ones with power, and they're the ones who get to license their work to publishers who are, brilliant enough to license and acquire their work, or they can self-publish, or like myself, they can do both. In any case, Toronto Indie Author Con is very exciting, and I'm looking forward to it this fall. Now, in case you haven't picked up on the sound of my voice, I'm still under the weather. The infection that I must have picked up, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to blame Damon and Kat from Book Funnel, who were there sponsoring a most amazing karaoke party in the final night of Superstars back in Colorado, and of course that's probably where I picked up the bug, or it was on the plane on the way home, because I didn't get sick until about the Wednesday following the conference. But you know what? Even if it was something that I picked up there, I had such a great time. I didn't go up on stage and sing. I was on stage enough. People saw enough of me. But I was there in the crowd, cheering people on, singing along. And then just all of us got up together and sang, I Will Walk 500 Miles. The Proclaimers, that song. Of course, I sang the Canadian version of it, and I said I will walk 800 kilometers. But in any case, you know what? Even if that's where I picked it up, I don't care. I would do it all again because I got to spend some time with some amazing people, some amazing laughs. I got to meet people and chat with folks I did not get a chance to chat with before. And so it was just an absolutely marvelous time. I would do it all again. But that being said, I am still under the weather, so I did have to go to a walk-in clinic this past Sunday. I had such a horrible fever. My blood pressure was beyond through the roof. I was weak. I had no energy at all. I could barely, when I walked or moved or whatever, I could barely breathe. So I'm a little bit behind in my push-up challenge, but I'm planning on getting caught up this weekend because I intend on, I'm feeling better today. And my voice is better. It's actually manageable, and I'm still stuffed up, but my voice is better. But that being said, I've already spoken enough, so I'm not going to be doing comments. And in terms of a brief personal update, I'm already in the process of sharing it. So personal update wise, I've got Once Bitten coming out. That is book 8 in my Canadian Werewolf series is coming out on Tuesday. And I'm so thrilled that all the formats are available on launch. So hardcover, trade paperback, ebook, and the audiobook narrated by the awesome Scott Overton, all going to be released on Tuesday. And I was so honored. My publicist, Mickey from Creative Edge Publicity, connected me with Heidi at Sudbury.com, and she did an interview with me the other day. And again, thank God it was just for a print, a text article, because my voice was really nasty a few days ago when we did that interview. But Heidi did the interview with me, and that article went live. I'll have a link to it in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. I'm just always so appreciative of the support that my hometown, and again, the hometown I left for university when at the age of 18, so a few years ago, that they still show me so much love and so much support, which is why I'm so excited that my character Michael Andrews gets to return back home to the Sudbury region and Levack, where I grew up, in book 9 that's coming out in the fall. But that's it for a personal update stuff. I'll get caught up hopefully in the next episode. But I do want to share a little bit of something before we get into the interview. This is a great interview with Daryn. And before we get into it, I need to ensure that I caution you with a few trigger warnings. Daryn is going to share some personal traumatic childhood experiences that involve physical and sexual abuse, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. Listener, please be advised that some of this content may be upsetting. I cried openly the first time I heard Daryn share her story, but I was so moved at what she went through and how she applied empathy to want to make a difference for other people, and just how powerful she is dedicating herself to her studies and to the programs that she's talking about in her postgraduate work that she's doing right now. She is incredibly inspiring. Her book is incredibly powerful and inspiring. And I know you're going to enjoy this interview, but I did want to leave you with a few warnings just in case it may trigger some of your own trauma. But without further ado, I'm going to let the bumper roll, and you can hear this conversation I had with Daryn Brito. Hey, Daryn, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so great to chat with you. So great to chat with you, particularly after having read through quite a bit of your book, The Becoming, Unrepeatable Miracle. Who are you? And you do have a poem on the back, which I love the mystery of this. So we're keeping people in suspense, but no, we won't be mean. Before we get into the book, before we get into the publication of the book, I met you in a very unique circumstance when I was a student at the Waterloo Regional Police Citizens Academy. And you came in and spoke to the class. And wow. So where do we begin? Where do we like how do you normally begin? The way you began there was whoa, was pretty intense. Where do you begin when you start talking about so who's Daryn Brito?
I feel like in terms of speaking engagements, my main goal is like to humilify myself first and make people realize that I'm just a human being like all of them. And
Okay,
then I like to bring in some educational aspects from my research, but also a lot of lived experience just to make the connection and make it actually click in people's brains what
right,
the research I'm speaking about, what that looks like in the real world. I think that's a big gap I see in academics. They have all these
right.
big fancy words, but no one knows what that looks like.
And you're like knee deep or neck deep in academia right now because you are, I mean, you're I think we talked about you needed to finish some exams or something or essays that were
Yeah.
due before we did this interview.
Yeah, I'm currently doing two master's programs
Two,
simultaneously.
because one's not enough, right?
Yeah. It's just preparation for my PhD. So one's in criminology thesis. So I'm interviewing
Wow.
young offenders, 18 to 25,
Okay.
asking them how they make sense of their trauma and how it's led them to the justice system, and then
Wow.
what they would identify as necessary for rehabilitation because no one's actually ever just asked them. And then the second one's in psychotherapy, so that in my PhD, I can administer a new therapeutic model for our jails and prisons.
Wow. Do you sleep?
Yes, 8 hours is necessary for me.
Oh my God, wow. Because I'm just thinking like the double masters and then the PhD. Oh my God. I went back to get my master's last year. I graduated with a master's in publishing because I figured I worked in the industry for 30 years. I may as well go through the program. And I was overwhelmed. And I can't even imagine what the double masters would be like.
I got lucky with my brain. I love to learn, and it's topics I'm really passionate about. So it really just feels like a gift to be in those spaces,
Wow.
especially coming from my background. A lot of kids in foster care don't get the opportunity to go to post-secondary. I
Yeah.
actually did a study in my undergrad, and only 3% attempt post-secondary, and half of them drop out due to lack of
It's only
support.
3% of people who are in foster care attend post-secondary.
Attempt, yeah.
Attempt, and then the ones who make it in, 50% drop out, you said?
Yes, due to lack of support.
Oh my God. So, well, how did how did you do it? How are you
Scholarship.
doing it?
A lot of scholarships. Yeah, I would not be able to afford it without.
Okay. I'm one of those people who, as a student, I was never really good at it. I tried hard and I just could never. So you had like you've had a knack for learning your whole life?
I think like the one thing too that comes to mind for me is growing up, there was a lot of things in my surroundings that I didn't have control over, but school was the one thing that I could control, and if I showed up, I would do well. So I would say I'm a try hard when it comes to school.
Oh wow, I love that. So when we look at when we talk about the PhD you're going to be doing and the work you're going to be doing to help people in a portion of society that don't often get looked at with compassion, right? They usually get looked at with judgment.
Mhm.
That's that's a lot, right? You're doing a lot of heavy lifting in that realm, aren't you?
Yeah, I think it's again from the way I grew up, I got to see being severe, like a victim of severe crimes. I also got to see offenders when they weren't offending
Right.
and the daily battles they were facing. So I developed a lot of compassion for them and a lot of love for them. And just, I saw also the systemic failures that were happening all around them that was just making life 10 times harder than it had to be. And
Wow.
if I could alleviate that in any way and help people heal, that would make my life.
So it's so interesting. I'm not sure if you've ever taken any of those personality tests like the
Clifton strengths or anything like that, but I suspect you would be a high empathy person.
Yeah, my empathy at times, I've always been told my heart's too big for my own good. I like get very emotional. Just even seeing people sleeping on the streets, it takes a big toll on me. So just I put all that energy into my work.
Wow. It's amazing what you're doing to help other people. And we'll get into the book as well, because I think the book is something that can help people
Mm.
realize they're not alone, help them with so many different things. And you've broken it down into really lovely, digestible chunks because there's a lot to process. So let's go back to your past. You've alluded to because of my past, because of the people I've interacted with, and you saw them as multidimensional people, not as perpetrators or anything like that. Let's dig into that a little bit. So, where did it all start?
Yeah, I can give like I'm used to doing this, so I'll just give a little summary. My mom had me really young, and she wasn't sure who my father was. So she had got into in a relationship with someone who didn't mind that she was already pregnant with someone else's baby. And then shortly after that, me and my first one sister are only 8 months apart actually, because she was a 3 month preemie. So
Right,
she had gotten pregnant right after with this gentleman. And then he was involved with some gang related activities and had been charged with, I think, manslaughter. But because he had given the names of the other people involved, he had only served 2 years. And then when he came out, it was a lot of abuse in my household, a lot of drug use, a lot of addiction. So that was really rough. But again, like I don't know otherwise, so I don't know what
right,
it'd be like to go home to a safe home. And then ultimately, she ended up getting a divorce when I was 8 and explained that he wasn't my father, only my younger siblings. And
right.
I did about 4 swab tests before I met my biological father. And I saw him from the age of 8 to 12. And during that period, me and my other 3 sisters from his family were getting sexually assaulted. So when I was 12, I had to go to court for the first time and testify as a victim. And then after that, it kind of like clicked to me that what I was dealing with at home wasn't exactly normal. And
Right.
I'd always like carried the weight of others' pain around me, trying to alleviate it in any way I could. I was like a main caregiver for my siblings in that environment and then afterwards. So I was always carrying a lot of pain and weight on my shoulders. So it led to a lot of suicidal ideation and unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as like self-harm. So I spent a lot of time in psychiatric care where my mom just stopped coming. I was in some homeless shelters and then I got placed into foster care where I was in some group homes, like rented a room for a bit from a friend. And then ultimately, when I turned 16, I started living independently.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it
Wow.
didn't really stop there. I got into an abusive relationship at the age of 17. And then by the age of 19, I was like, okay, no more abuse in your life, Daryn. In which I went to that cake, the court case that I had talked about at Citizens Police Academy for IPV. And it became one of the most successful they had ever seen in Canada in terms of court proceedings. And they said I had educated the courtroom on trauma while I was testifying on the stand.
Really?
So that's
Wow.
when they asked me to start training their officers.
So at that was the point at which, after you had did the test, after you testified, that was when somebody from the regional police force reached out and said, "We need your help to
Yeah,
help
they're
our
like, how can we
officers
replicate?
understand."
How can we replicate this for other victims?
Wow. So we could help victims, but also help. I mean, obviously, help the police force itself understand
Mhm.
and interact with people, and maybe in a more compassionate way.
Yeah. Yeah, so I used to hate police officers. I actually had my jaw fractured by one throughout my teenage years.
Oh my
And
God.
I had I was like, nope, these people aren't for me. They're not here to help us. Especially when you grow up in a home environment like that, they're kind of painted as like the bad people. It's
Right.
like
Yeah.
betrayal and no protection there. But then when the investigating detective on my case, when I was 17 for, well, I was 19 when it went to court, she was just the most compassionate, kind human being I'd ever met in my entire life. And
Right.
it really started to shift my perspective. And I could start to see things from their side, that they're
Right.
not trained properly for starters. They're putting their lives on the line in a lot of things they walk into, not knowing what they're going to face and how to protect themselves in those spaces. So their
Mm.
hearts almost become callous to the people they're serving. And I don't think it's intentional, but they're just
Yeah.
not trained properly, not supported properly. Emotions are hidden from the world. They're carrying a lot of weight on their shoulders and inside and not able to speak about it with the people around them. So,
So you grew up in an environment, you talked about the gangs and all the things that were going on, in an environment where the police were the bad guys and they were
mhm.
there to not protect and serve, they were there to overreach and do all the things that, and yet you went, I think, was it at the age of 19 or that you interacted with this officer or
Yeah.
this person? So what was it? I mean, that you actually thought you would trust. It was like show up at the station with a report and that you would actually give them some trust. Like, where did that come from?
It definitely wasn't the police officers that I was trusting
Okay.
in that moment. It was more so my partner at that time, we didn't actually like break up. We had intended that like he was gonna go get help, and then when it was safe enough to live together again, we would do so. But then there was some cheating going on, and when you're in the relationship, you don't realize how bad it is until
Yeah.
you're separated. And then there was like a lot of guilt and shame. The emotions that you experience when you leave one of those relationships, I can't even begin to explain. There's so many going on. So it was a lot of flip-flopping back and forth for me, but I knew that if I didn't make the report, other people were going to get hurt, and I could have prevented that. So the day I made the report, my like all I could think about was his next partners and his sister and his mom who he had hurt while we were in a relationship, and how I could prevent that and show others like that there's a better way to go about these things.
Wow. So even in the midst of all this pain and trauma, you're still thinking about how you can help other people. Wait,
Yeah, that's definitely what
there's the
kept me alive.
empathy.
Yeah, if it weren't for my heart for others, I would not be here today.
Oh my God. Wow. So when did you decide? So you've done speaking, right? You've done a
Mhm.
lot of speaking engagements with training police officers as well.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work out of Ontario Police College for
Okay.
any detectives going into IPV. I've done a lot
Oh,
of
just for
speaking,
listeners who don't know,
yeah,
what is IPV?
intimate partner violence or
Intimate
domestic
partner.
violence.
Thank you. Okay.
And then I've done a lot of work with Waterloo Regional Police Service as well. And then I've done some work with NGOs and social services, just in trauma-informed practice. I've got flown out to Seattle where I got to speak to an audience of 3,000 women from 120 countries.
Wow.
Um, just this summer, I got flown out to Halifax to present my research on foster youth to a bunch of support service programs across Canada for their universities.
Wow.
So yeah, it's blown up. Every time I talk, I get a bunch more opportunities, which is just such a gift.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like when I saw you and after you finished your talk and in which a whole bunch of us were wanting to talk to you and get a book signed and stuff like that. I was like, "Hey, can you come on?" Did I ask to come on my podcast that day
Yes.
or did I
Yeah.
email? I can't remember how it was, but I can imagine, yeah, when someone's impacted by a speaker, that's usually someone else is in the room that says, "Hey, can you come speak at this event?" So how did you get into speaking? Like, was that something you did? Did you do drama in school when you were younger, or where did that come from?
No, I had severe anxiety. I would actually have panic attacks every time you had to do a presentation in school. I think just after, I don't know if this is going to sound bizarre to some people, but just after I left that relationship, I had a vision, I don't know what you want to call it, of me on a stage talking to people. And all I knew is that I was helping them. I had no idea what was going on. I just like felt my presence on a stage talking to people. And then shortly after that, I started public speaking. So I don't know if it was like something from the divine realm being downloaded to me or what it was, but it was bizarre how I had that vision and then here I am today.
Wow. And I mean the double master's, the PhD, but also if that weren't enough, so the becoming, when did you decide that you were going to put these these essays, these meditations, I may want to call them. Is that a fair assessment? Into a book?
Yeah, yeah. It was actually in the middle of my undergrad. I
I
had been
guess you didn't
writing
have
my
enough
whole
going on.
Yeah, I had been writing my whole life in a journal.
Okay.
Just like everything. Even when I look back on my old journals right now, I'm like, oh, you were really mentally ill. But I had just written down like almost like revelations I've had my
Right.
life and just
Okay.
the mindset shift I experienced through my healing journey. So I'd basically had books written. And then in my undergrad, I was trying to think of like the public speaking's great, but I really love like the one-on-one interactions I get to have with people. So it's like, how can I offer a further reach than just these events and somewhere where someone can just be in the safety of like their own home and still be accessing this information that I'm sharing? So I took all the things I had written over my life and just tried to organize it into a book so that someone could have the information I had learned throughout these hard experiences from the comfort of their own homes.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. And so, who would you say? So, and I do have to ask about the art on. You're not an artist as well, are you? The art on the cover?
I do love to draw and paint. I wish it didn't take so long.
But is that? I mean, that looks like a almost like it's a tattoo or something, right?
Just a line art, yeah.
It's line art. And did you do the
Yeah.
line art as well?
Um, that one I pulled off. I'd like done electronically and then like
Okay,
edited it
okay,
electronically where the lines
okay.
didn't look as good as I wanted them to.
But that's like a single consecutive line,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I love that. I'm not
I
an
got to do
artist,
that
so
in high
yeah.
school a bit.
Oh, wow, that is really cool. So, who's this book for? Like, who would be the ideal person that's going to benefit from? I mean, I've benefited from reading it already, but like,
Mhm.
who would you identify as like these are the people who would probably benefit from this book?
Really, anyone who has experienced adversity, which I think we all do at some
Yeah.
point in our life. Ultimately, I like would love it to just fall into the hands of the people who really need it, who are just struggling with their circumstances. I think a big thing for me is I had to my heart had almost become I'd like put walls up, and I think I really just want to help people break down those walls and know that it's safe enough to open your heart to the world again. So I'm working on getting a bunch into prisons. That would be really cool. Even just, I've got a bunch, I do a lot of mentorship with Family and Children's Services and advocacy work there. So I run this one group and we were able to order all of them a book. Yeah, there's been a few companies where I've done public speaking with. Actually, the parole and probation officers bought like 40 from me.
Oh, wow.
I don't
Okay.
know if you're familiar with Equitable, they're an insurance company. I did some speaking for them and they ordered a bunch for their building and for their employees as well after I'd done some advocacy work for them as well on their donor day.
Wow. That's
Honestly,
amazing.
anyone I think could read my book. I would hope so. I think it can also target teenagers as well. It's not like limited to adult.
Right.
I tried to make it very simple to read
Right.
for the non-academics too who don't like the big words.
Well, that's where the digestible chunks, like sometimes
Mhm.
it's an essay that's a half page, but there's a lot in it, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
reflection, there's a lot of introspection, I guess, and I'd say meditation as well, something to meditate on, to think about.
Yeah, I love meditation.
So, how did you, I mean, like know what to do to get this book out? Did you have to,
I
what,
didn't. I was honestly asking like Google and chat, like, how do I self-publish a book? And I just saw that like the Amazon KDP, Kindle
right?
Direct Publishing, was super easy to use. And I could just upload my manuscript, upload my cover, and then it was published. So I did that.
Okay, wow. And when did you first release this?
I actually released it on my ex-abuser's first parole hearing, just in case he didn't end up getting released that date, but I just wanted, if he did get released that date, I wanted to remember that date in just a better light and just have something good to look back
A
on. So it wasn't
positive.
just a hard day. Yeah. So I released it on the first day or the day of his first parole hearing.
Oh wow, I love that. I love how there's this ember that never fades of positivity in the things that you're doing. Like even the work that you want to do with people who have been incarcerated or have found themselves in really tough situations and made some mistakes. And you're fanning those embers into positivity and hope.
Oh, thank you. I'm told I'm like giddy, but I think like my siblings are always like, "You're so giddy." But that's like hard for me to like see in myself because for so long I was such a like sad human being growing
Right.
up. So I love that my healing is showing to the outside world. That's really cool to hear, and I
Right.
appreciate it.
Wow. So, okay, so anyone listening to the podcast who has experienced some adversity, maybe some trauma, some things that they haven't talked to anyone about, any words of sort of advice for them based on your experiences in, both surviving, but also then turning that into something you're using to help other people?
The first thing that's coming to mind is it was absolutely not your fault, and you don't have to carry that burden alone. I something I realized from my public speaking is every time I say these truths out loud, it creates a space where people feel safe enough to share their truth with me, which is so cool that I get to like be that safe space for them. I think like the world makes us think we have to hide these things and that they make us less of a person. And I would never say like these experiences define you, but they absolutely do shape you and make you who you are. And it's really powerful to like reclaim that and turn it into a superpower rather than a fault. And oh, another big one for me was forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for anyone else, it's for you. You didn't experience what was done to you in the first place, and you don't experience to keep carrying that around and letting it poison you. And it's so freeing to release that.
Mm. Oh wow, that's amazing. So what's next? I mean, the PhD and stuff. So how close are you to finishing the master's and getting to that next stage?
I just finished my first semester, so I have one more semester of coursework, and then I'll be starting my interviews in May. And then I have 400 hours of practicum for the psychotherapy one that I'll
Oh
be
wow.
doing throughout the summer as well. And then hopefully starting my PhD in September of 2027 is the goal.
Okay.
And then I hadn't, I'm also working on a housing model. I don't think I've mentioned that yet.
No, no,
A
you
lot
haven't.
of faculty in my program do a lot of work with the homeless population. So I had got this idea of a housing model where there's holistic support, so the rent is affordable. Social services provide $700 a month for shelter, if anyone didn't know that. But so it's not really meeting rent costs that we see in
Yeah.
our in Canada. So the goal would be to offer $700 shelter, but then all that money would funnel into the bottom floor where there's free therapists, free doctors, a social worker
Oh,
assigned to every floor, a community kitchen supplied by the food bank. So all basic needs are within the space that they're living, and support is on site. Um, and that would ideally be for people leaving foster care or leaving prison or leaving an abusive relationship. But something else I really want to implicate is there's a major gap in research. So research is conducted and then it's not applied for almost 17 years, which is not, and
think
then the
things
whole
have changed by
circumstances
then.
have changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So something I would really love to have is like an ID code, which gives you access only to your floor just for people's safety. But then also, every time you're using a service, it's going into a data system so they can see, like, okay, this building's really relying on therapy. Let's put more money into therapy. Or
Right.
this building's really struggling with food insecurity. Let's put more money into food. So our resources aren't being wasted and it's meeting the needs of the people they're trying to serve. That's another big gap I see in social services.
Wow, amazing stuff. So again, so people are listening and they're hearing about some of the things that are some goals and some ways that things could be improved. What can the average person do? Either, when they know that there was a need in the community
Mhm.
for some of these services, or even somebody who knows someone else is hurting or someone else needs that help. What are some of the things that like the average person can do?
The biggest thing is love. People don't really need help. They just need to be reminded what love feels like and just showing up with love and compassion to these people. I think like helping people doesn't necessarily always help them because they don't figure out how to navigate these things on their own, but showing them compassion in their hardest moments reminds them they're not alone and they can walk through it a little bit with their head lifted a little bit higher. Another thing that I found a lot of joy in is volunteering. I love to volunteer my time and just a lot of it's just presence too, like just sitting in a gym while these kids play basketball instead of them being on the streets turning to things that will take them down the wrong path or even just packing food at the food bank. Like it's really simple things that you can do with a friend or someone you enjoy being around, and it brings a lot of help to people in the community. You may not see it directly, but it does make a really big difference in people's lives.
Wow. Thank you
Sure.
and thank you for the conversation and for the book that you wrote and all those things. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find out more about you online? Maybe somebody wants to book you for a speaking engagement. Maybe want to figure out getting a hold of your book, like any of those things. Where
Yeah,
can people find you?
the best place would be all my social media is Daryn Brito, so just my name, and then I have a website, darynbrito.org, which will connect you to all those places.
Awesome. Daryn, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
A few things to reflect on from this interview is I think the thing that sticks with me the strongest is Daryn's fear of other people getting hurt. Not her own hurt, but other people getting hurt being what led her to filing a police report. That stems to something that's really important for us as writers, and something I think we need to remember. The stories we share, the things we write, whether they are biographical, whether they are fiction, whether they're nonfiction, whatever it is, that's our way of helping others. Just the way Daryn's book helps others, but also the work she's doing in the community is all directed towards providing services and support for people who need it. We always have choices when things happen to us. And I'm always inspired when I see people who make the choices to give, to love, to support, to show that to the world. And again, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about writing and the writing community in general is just how giving that community is. I mean, I'm still living off of a high of the love and the mutual support and the camaraderie and the team spirit and all of those things that live in a place like Superstars Writing Seminars, which I was at, a couple weeks ago. But I think we can continue that, particularly being inspired by people like Daryn. And remember that, getting the work done, getting the book edited, getting it produced, getting it, formatted, and all the things we need to do to get it out into the world is truly a gift to the world. Because often there's going to be elements in your story, in your fiction, in your nonfiction, whatever it is that you're releasing, in your poetry, in your art in general, that's going to reach other people and going to remind them that they're not alone. So, so important. The other thing I wanted to reflect on was Daryn's perspective, and particularly how her perspective of what the police were changed based on her experience. So she talked about growing up and And growing up in the environment she was growing up in, the only environment she knew, the police were after you. The police were bad. They were the bad guys. The only reason she stepped up, because she thought, probably at the time, the only reason she stepped up was her fear that other people were going to get hurt. So she was almost like she was willing to sacrifice herself to these bad people, the police, in order to help other people, because maybe they would stop the person who was causing so much harm that she was aware of. Interestingly, she encountered, and Daryn mentioned this, and we talked a bit more about this in that class that I had in the Citizens Academy with Waterloo Regional Police, was that one investigator who showed Daryn compassion, and that helped Daryn realize a change in perspective, that the police weren't the enemy, that the police were there to protect and to serve. And perhaps, as she came to understand, maybe they didn't always have the best training in order to approach people from a different walk of life with a bit more openness and willing to listen and understand and compassion. But that one investigator made the difference. So a couple things for me to reflect on here is, all it takes is one person, all it takes is one action, one show of compassion or kindness to another person, whether it's someone you know, someone in your life, or a stranger you encounter. What's the harm in showing a little bit of extra compassion? It can make a world of difference. Look at what this did. This one investigator, a police investigator, showed compassion to Daryn. And look at the positive that Daryn is now putting out into the world because of this. I want to relate this back not just to how we can make differences in our lives, but again, in our writing world. That perspective, Daryn had, two different perspectives, probably more, but, let's just, we'll simplify it down to two perspectives of who the police are, based on environment and situations. And that is something we need to do in our fiction to make sure our characters are genuine and real. In your fiction, your protagonist sees themselves as the good guy, and the reader usually does, because they're tending to see it through that person's perspective. And the bad guy or the villain or the why am I blanking on the name, the terminology? Protagonist, antagonist. There you go. I had to go there. So the antagonist isn't necessarily a bad person. In a fictional story of someone in Daryn's perspective, the police may be the antagonist, because you are rooting for this person, and in every situation it appears that the police are doing harm, because that's the perspective. From the perspective of the officer or whatever, they're the good guy, and the people on the other side are the antagonists. They're the bad guys. Everyone is the protagonist in their own story. And it's really important, if we want to create characters who are vivid and more real, is we need to create them as multidimensional people. We're not doing bad things just because they're bad people. Yes, there are bad people in the world, but behind many of the actions that we see as bad or negative, there's a story, there's something there. One of the most powerful shows, television programs, I remember in recent history, was a Canadian-produced one called Flashpoint. And what I loved about Flashpoint, and it was about a like sort of a SWAT team in Toronto, Ontario, who were there with the sniper and everything to kind of take out the bad guys. But it was such a human show in that it showed the humanity of the officers involved and the traumatic effect if they had to pull a trigger and harm another person or kill another person, the impact it had on them. It was very real. But the other real thing I loved about that show is it often started with that high energy point of, oh no, this is the moment, the bank robbers and blah, 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 and they've got hostages. But then they would flash back to 12 hours earlier or 2 days earlier or whatever. And you would get to see the perspective of the people who were the bank robbers, for example. And you got to see their situation. And you realized that in a lot of cases, most cases, they're not bad people. They were just people in bad situations. People who maybe didn't make the best choices, but you can kind of understand by seeing the situation how they came to make those choices. And so what you have are antagonists on both sides and protagonists on both sides of that situation. It was so human, it was so real, and it was a powerful reminder that, the people who do you wrong, the people who don't see the world the way you see the world, are not necessarily your enemy. We often have more in common. It's good for us to know in our day-to-day lives and to be reminded of that. And thank you to Daryn for that. I really appreciate that reminder. It's so important. I got a lot of that reminder when I was in the Citizens Police Academy. Such a wonderful program. The folks who put together such a tremendous program. And it reminded me, I don't go around doing bad things, but when I'm out in the world and I would see a police officer or a police car drive by, I would kind of get all nervous and say, oh my God, I'm going to do something wrong and they're going to get me. For no reason. When they're there, and again, I got to see and interact with so many people who work with as officers and auxiliary officers with the force there, and just see how beautifully human and wonderful and dynamic they are. And now, when I see a Water Regional Police car, or I see somebody in uniform at a public event, I kind of look to see, is this one of my friends that I know? And I know what they're doing. I know they're there to protect and to serve. And it was such a great program. I would encourage you, if there is a program like that where you live, it's definitely worth getting insights. The other thing is I saw the compassion that the investigators and officers had for not just the victims that they interacted with, but also they did have compassion for the people that they had to deal with, who were breaking laws in different ways, because there is a level of compassion that we don't get to see, and that was fantastic. But I'll bring this back to remembering that multi-layered humanity and looking at people with empathy, even as a writer, when you're creating characters, creating your villains or your antagonists with empathy and understanding, why did they make these decisions? Why did they do the things that they're doing? What environment were they exposed to? What things happened to them that would have given them that perspective? And how do they see what they're doing as not the bad thing, but that they're the good guys in the situation? I think if we can apply that empathy in our fiction, we won't be able to help but also apply that empathy in our lives, in our interactions with other people. And the people who read our books, we know reading creates empathy. We know that people who read have a higher degree of empathy, but our books can also help other people in that way. And that's a powerful and that's a beautiful thing. Well, that's it for this episode. My voice is getting worse and worse. I want to thank you so much for listening. I want to thank Daryn for such a great interview, willing to come and chat with this goofy stranger who said, "Hey, I really liked your talk. Would you like to come on my podcast? Who are you?" So I love that she was open to coming and chatting with me about her book and her story. I'm grateful to the Waterloo Regional Police for their academy and all that they do for the community. I'm grateful to you, dear listener, for being here, week in and week out, or if it's just week in, if this is your first time, welcome. But great to have you here and listening. And I'm also grateful to my patrons and my coffee buddies who support me over at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as those coffee buddies at buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie. Thank you. Great. I'm so grateful for your support. Just a reminder that the support that I got from the February payment that came in, I reallocated that to the fundraising for Canadian Mental Health Association for the push-up challenge that I'm doing. So thank you so much for your generous donation, which went to supporting mental health. It's such an important thing we don't pay enough attention to. But until next week, and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, as always. And as always, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.